Hey everyone. All right, Paul. Today we are chatting about a topic that comes hot off the heels, the recent decision around Roe, the
hmm
overturning of the Roe versus Wade. Um, what are we talking about today, and where is it going?
Yeah, I've been a part of the pro-life movement for, my entire life. And um, when the Dobbs decision came out last Friday and Roe versus Wade was reversed, uh, I didn't feel jubilation, which, if you were to talk to me 5 years ago, that would have been exactly what I would have expected to feel. And I felt a lot of discomfort. Um, so I've been thinking a lot and writing a lot, um, and read the opinions and things like that
Mhm.
uh, since last Friday. And I think there's a lot of people in the same position. And I think that if you're Catholic and you're thinking with Catholic principles, I think there's a space for being uncomfortable with this decision. So that's
Mhm.
why I wanted to talk about.
Cool. And that's got me really intrigued. Why be uncomfortable with this decision? And like you also grew up deeply involved in, pro-life stuff from a young age, writing for contests and praying at the clinics, and as a kid leading praying for children events and stuff. And my family was always very, very involved. But then the last couple of years, maybe like yourself, growing outside of the narrow limits um, of the movement, and where Peter has done such a great job of pointing out, yes, this is important, but what is the greater context that it has to live in? What is the Catholic context and not the more partisan context, which is what seems to be happening. So again, probably more of an American discussion for those of our friends joining us from around the world, maybe. But yeah, let's get into all of that. So welcome everybody. Today it's the Pope Francis generation. It's the show for Catholics struggling with the Church's teaching, who feel they might not belong in the Church anymore, but who still hunger for a God of love and goodness.
Your hosts are me, Paul Fahey, a professional catechist.
I'm Dominic, someone who needs catechesis. Together, we're taking our own look at the Catholic Church, her teachings and practices from three views that changed our world.
And those are the Kerygma, the Doctrine of Theosis, and the teachings of Pope Francis.
Together with you, we're the Pope Francis generation. And what's cool about that is that doesn't necessarily mean we're all, you know, walking in lockstep with all the same opinions. What I love about the Holy Father is his sense of almost every time he approaches a discussion, he brings a new point of view that forces us to think a little more deeply,
Yeah.
about stuff. So,
Would I'm That was our whole discussion last week about chastity, where it forced us to reconsider it in a way, at least that I had not considered.
mhm. So let's dig in. What is the uh, why are we talking about pro-life for today, and what does it mean to actually be pro-life?
Yeah, there's a couple places I want to start. I think I think I think first I'll start with my own story and involvement in the pro life movement. My parents were both extremely involved in the pro life movement when I was a kid, uh, and and they are still very involved. My dad is an old school Catholic Democrat who jumped on board the pro life movement pretty early on. I mean, I remember riding in Right to Life floats in parades. I remember my parents being involved with a local like crisis pregnancy hotline. I remember donating things to crisis pregnancy centers. Um, I remember every year at a local free fair, my dad would set up and run the Right to Life booth with all of the pro life material,
Mm-hmm.
and he still does that to this day. Um, and when I was in high school, I was involved in a high school pro life group. I went to the March for Life. We prayed rosaries in front of the abortion clinic in the nearby city. Um, in college, I was president of the Students for Life Club on campus for most of my time there. Took trips to the March for Life, prayed in front of the abortion clinic. Um, I wrote about pro life stuff a lot. I was as involved as you probably could be without being, I never really had a leadership position
I was
outside
going
of,
to say, short of starting a nonprofit, that's like all the check boxes the layperson can get into. So, and
yeah,
I did all of the same things that you just described.
yeah, yeah. I don't think I did any writing contests. I was not a big fan of writing back then. But then after college, in like my mid-20s, I started reading more about Catholic social teaching, which was something I was pretty unaware of up until that point.
Mhm.
And maybe it was my dad's, old labor union Catholic Democrat perspective kind of, roots in there. But I latched on to Catholic social teaching very quickly.
Mhm.
And I realized, I started seeing like the cracks in the pro-life movement, both what I had been a part of and what I had participated in myself, and then what I was hearing in the national discussions and statewide discussions from the pro-life movement.
Mhm.
And I saw it was like Catholic social teaching changed the lens with which I was viewing things, the principles that I was evaluating things.
Mhm.
And I realized that the pro-life movement didn't hold up the way that I thought that it did. And that discomfort with the pro-life movement was really solidified in 2015 and 2016 when former President Trump was elected, and I saw the pro-life movement really like grasping onto him, not just as a voting for the lesser evil, which I was used to and have done most of my life,
Mhm.
but really like championing someone who I saw as embodying a lot of things that were contrary to Catholic social teaching,
Mhm.
and what a pro-life society was supposed to look like. So, yeah, that's the perspective I'm coming from it. I very much believe in universal human dignity. I mean, the church proposes that every single human person has infinite value. It's like a
Mhm.
cross section. It's the depth of infinite value, right? And then the universality. It's
Mhm.
everybody. And just that proposal alone, that every human person has infinite value, um, shapes all of Catholic social teaching, but it also like drives a wedge in every single political ideology, in every single political party,
Mhm.
especially in the U.S. Um, and it disrupts any type of partisanship that I had, and I think that anybody has. Um, anyways, I very much believe in the infinite value of unborn human life, but I've grown to have a different perspective than what the mainstream pro-life movement
Mhm.
has.
So you mentioned that um, with this overturning, and I'm assuming for those who are watching this, you have a basic sense of what the whole Roe versus Wade thing has been for the last, what is it, 60, 70 years now?
50. Well, I think
50?
1973, so 49.
There we go. I'm a genius with dates. Assuming you have a basic sense of what's all about and what just happened, so we don't need to rehash, the history and stuff. So I'm curious then, why is it you didn't feel the elation that we've been seeing
It,
on a lot of Facebook pages and, from a lot of people?
it may be important to rehash that. I think there may
Okay.
be a lot of I don't know. I think the context is important. So previous to 1973, um, abortion was still very much a national and debated topic.
Mhm.
You saw pro-life or anti-abortion movements growing, um, and those were mostly Catholic Democrats, and they mostly framed the pro-life movement as another civil rights issue, right, in the 50s and 60s.
Mhm.
Um, and you saw it playing out in specific states,
Mhm.
where some states were regulating or prohibiting abortion more, and some states were lessening those regulations.
Mhm.
And then in 1973, the Supreme Court decided that there was a constitutional right to abortion,
Mhm.
um, which was, um, I think it's fair to say, they pulled that out of thin air. Um,
So, quick question on that point: what happened such that it went from being decided at the state level to where it needed to be addressed at a
yeah,
constitutional level,
yeah. So
the
the
Supreme Court?
previous to 1973, there was no sense that there was any federal or constitutional right to an abortion or rights that protected unborn human life. So it was a matter that legislatures decided at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
So Roe versus Wade, that decision said that the Constitution guarantees people the right to have access to abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's a constitutional right, that supersedes the state laws that were prohibiting or regulating abortion. Um, so this decision, Dobbs versus the Jackson Women's Health Organization, it was a okay. I won't get into too much of the details. I read the whole opinion. There's a lot of interesting nerdy facts. It reversed Roe and said that the Constitution doesn't, there is not a constitutional right to have access to abortion. Thereby, it moved the issue back to the legislature, back to the states, to decide for themselves how much or how little they will regulate abortion. It didn't say that unborn people have constitutional rights. It didn't go that far. It also doesn't end abortion. I think this is something that is maybe a misconception that people have, that like now because of the Dobbs decision, now abortion's outlawed across the country. Well, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
It's only unavailable in states that have laws saying that, in states with laws restricting it.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also this idea that it's going to end abortion, and that's also not true. The research that I've seen has shown that it will reduce abortions in this country about 10 to 15%, which isn't nothing. I mean, these are real human lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's also not anywhere near ending abortion. It's such a small decrease because the states that have by far the most abortions, like New York and California,
Mm-hmm.
also have the most permissive abortion laws already, and those aren't going to change anytime soon. So those states will continue providing they'll continue providing abortions at the same level they have been, if not a greater level, because there may be people traveling from other states to there. So I think that's important. Clear up some of those possible misconceptions about the Supreme Court case. I mean, I thought the ruling, the majority opinion, was good. I think it was good morally. I think it was good law, good legally. I mean, I don't, something that I follow. I read and listen to the conservative commentator David French, and I value his perspective a lot. And he made a point over the weekend where he's like, in most of the Western world, so most of Europe, they figured out their abortion policies through the legislative process. So they have way less contentious debates and culture wars about abortion than the U.S. does. And he blamed, and I think rightly so, he blamed Roe versus Wade on why abortion is so contentious in the U.S., because we never had the opportunity to work that out in a democratic and legislative way. It was just pulled out of thin air by the Supreme Court in 1973. And that was just imposed on the whole country, a country that was still figuring out where exactly it stood on abortion. So I think that reversing Roe is good law. But even then, after I read the decision on Friday, I still wasn't fully comfortable with it.
Yeah, you said it didn't feel like a victory, and you mentioned how we got here lacked two key, important factors. You want to share those?
Yeah, I mean, intellectually, I'm like, I agree with this. This is good. It's good that our country doesn't say that abortion is a constitutional right.
Yeah.
Because it violates human dignity so profoundly. It's good that it's not a constitutional right.
Mm-hmm.
But how we got here, like you said, how we got here. So there's two things as I've thought about this and read about this in the past week. How the cracks that I see in the pro-life movement and what we have done, the movement has done to get to this Dobbs decision, I think has been profoundly inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking, like putting on the lens of Catholic social teaching, which I hope to talk about in this podcast more. We should spend several episodes, maybe next
Mm-hmm.
season, talking about Catholic social teaching. I think it's fair to say, and this is my opinion, but having studied a lot of Catholic social teaching, I think it's fair to say that abortion is a consequence of social and economic systems that don't accommodate the biological reality of women and fertility in children.
Exactly. I love the line that, not the line. I love the insight that's needs to be pointed out so much more, is that the concrete moment of point of sin is a symptom of a much bigger situation that nobody's prepared to address, maybe, or afraid to, because it's going to demand a lot more attention, energy, presence, creativity, and being able to, yes, this particular thing is a sin, is a crime, is a terrible thing, but to throw so much of our energy into that,
Yeah. So
anyhow, go ahead.
So pro-choicers will argue, and there's some truth to this. They will argue that women do not have an equal place in society and in the economy because of their own fertility, and access to contraception and access to abortion allow a more equal playing field. And I disagree in that I don't think a woman's biology is oppressive.
Yeah.
But I think that we've constructed a society and an economy
Mm-hmm.
that, because it doesn't accommodate
Right.
child rearing and pregnancy, that the biological realities of pregnancy and child rearing feel like they're oppressive and are experienced as being oppressive,
Mm-hmm.
because our economic and social systems put all the burden of pregnancy and raising kids onto women.
Mm-hmm.
When instead it should be going out of its way to accommodate women, right? If you think about, in order to have the economy we have, in order to have families that take care of themselves, and have people that work and people that do the domestic work, if you took women and the work that they do, taking care of children, and they left that, the economy would entirely collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Our economy is dependent upon the free labor of women and domestic workers.
Mm-hmm.
And I say free labor because our economy doesn't compensate it.
Right.
We could compensate it by doing what the church teaches, which is paying just wages, paying family wages. I mean, the church teaches that a just wage would allow one person be able to financially support their whole family,
Mm-hmm.
giving them access to not just food and shelter and healthcare, the essentials, but also access to education and recreation and enough for savings. That's a just wage. And if our economy paid just wages, then they would be actually compensating the people who stay at home and take care of children and take care of families. But we don't pay just wages, right? We expect women, primarily women, but caregivers, to give free labor in order for our economy to run.
Wow. I mean, what an amazing concept. And as a quick aside, this is in no way, of course, flattening the genius of women, the involvement of women purely to child rearing and so on, but such that the majority of women have a call to that. and thrive in that or excel in that. But there are plenty, of course, who don't, and it's not their call. But there are plenty of dads, who choose to stay home while the woman is out, able to do other things and so on. So we're not denigrating any of that either.
And there's also the reality that we are both men talking about this. And
I'm just thinking here, why do we have a woman on this call? I could think of like a ton from where Peter is would be amazing on this. But hey, guys should talk about this too. So yeah, just the family wage and stuff. My wife and I like to think about this sort of stuff a lot. We like to compare living styles to, how things are in other countries, how they are here, why the way they are here. So much frustration and why like this point of a just wage, right? That the church has been promoting and advocating for a long time. Like she's been talking about this for a long time. Why hasn't it happened? Why does it people aren't getting? Because what's so intriguing about that point is that it starts so much further upstream.
Yeah.
And we haven't even got to the point about stuff like actually making women feel safe in their decisions, because so many feel like it's the only option.
Yeah.
Right.
We're just on the level of the economy.
Yeah. So taking this discussion further back upstream, and then what that addresses and how it shakes out.
Here's a passage from Pope Francis that I think gets at that. So it's from his book Let Us Dream that came out a year or two ago. He says this: our sin, and when he says our, he's talking about this book is about how does the human family move on from the pandemic. So he says, our sin lies in failing to recognize value, in wanting to possess and exploit that which we do not value as a gift. So this harkens back to when he talked about chastity, right? This desire to possess others. He goes on, sin always has this same root of possessiveness, of our enrichment at the expense of other people and of creation itself. It's the same sinful mindset that we were just discussing in relationship to abuse. The sin is in exploiting what must not be exploited, in extracting wealth, power, or satisfaction from where it should not be taken. Sin is a rejection of the limits that love requires. And then he says that in his encyclical Laudato Si, he speaks of a distorted mindset that he calls the technocratic paradigm. And he says this is a mindset that despises the limit that another's value imposes. So behind all of this is this brokenness, this fallenness within humanity to possess and exploit others for my own gain, to put my wealth, my power, and my satisfaction above the dignity and value of others, to despise, and I love this line at the end, it's a mindset that despises the limit that another's value imposes. So when you think about this, in any relationship we have that's a loving relationship, spouse, speak of kids, speak of family and friends, you can really almost chart or measure how much love there is in that relationship by how much willingness the individuals are at allowing another person to impose on them. My children impose on me all the time. I mean, when they were infants, they even imposed on my sleep, which is very precious to me. My time wasn't my own anymore. My money wasn't my own anymore. My sleep wasn't even my own anymore. My children imposed a lot, but I welcomed that imposition because I chose to love them. But within us is this mindset that despises that imposition. And this is a consequence of the fall. So we see this in our economic and social systems, especially within a more libertarian capitalism that wants to propose that, well, if we let everyone act selfishly, they'll just kind of balance out in the end. And the church rejects that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, encouraging the more proactive care for others, care for creation, that entering into community. I like the image somebody once painted that, we have this great statue to Lady Liberty on one side, this great god of our culture, but we don't have a corresponding statue on the other side to Lady Responsibility. And I think that's a significant issue with the mythology of what it means to be an American. And I think that it's shaking out, and we struggle with the effects of that.
Yeah. Which is the heart of Americanism, of libertarianism, is that the individual is the foundational unit. And while the church teaches that every individual has infinite dignity, it says that human beings are inherently social, communal, and that the family is the foundational unit. And we know this because, as we say all the time in our faith, we are made in the image and likeness of God. But who is the Christian God? An isolated individual? No. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. A community. We're made in the image and likeness of a community of people. And we see this playing out in our own dependence on each other, right? I didn't bring myself into existence. I didn't raise myself. I didn't educate myself. And I mean, we know that isolation destroys human flourishing.
Right. It's a theme that's really emerged a lot in my awareness, my just watching like what the culture does, what my own reaction is to all kinds of problems. And one thing that's become very clear is the sense of America as a frontier country. And I think it's one we haven't left behind yet. And it's because we're still quite young. We were born, this country was born as a frontier, one step this way and it puts you out of all human contact and into the realm of incredible danger. And on the frontier, there is nobody else to take care of you. You're it. Okay. And what's just intriguing to me is that as that was happening in the cultural consciousness, we then threw at it the printing press and modern media and then calcified that idea. And now we're raised with this sense of, cowboys are and I love cowboys, but that sense of we're still on a frontier, even with each other. And even though the world has all of a sudden the drawstrings have been pulled tight and the world has, snapped together like a puzzle, we still act in our culture as though nobody is here to take care of me. I have no community. And we end up living that way. And we have to basically pay for admission into communities that bring us safety, like insurance. And, you miss a rental payment, 2 rental payments, you don't have a home anymore. There's this underlying, it's like the bottom level of the Maslow's pyramid, for what that's worth, does not exist in the cultural consciousness, I think, for a lot of Americans. There's that constant fear, and you maybe look at other countries or how people lived a couple hundred years ago. They had other problems, different fears, but it was not like this. And in a way, that for me has made so much sense about why we are so afraid of the impacts of our decisions, afraid of what's going to happen tomorrow, we're just afraid of everything, afraid of others, because we don't start from a place of a community that's there to care.
It's built on competition instead of solidarity. And if it's competition, then I have to do whatever I can for me and my own. And I expect you to do whatever you can for you and your own. And if there's conflict, and I'm going to do my best to win.
Yeah.
Whereas the Christian proposal is, if we're made in the image and likeness of a God who is a community, and we are radically interdependent on each other, then just because I exist, the community owes me things. And just because I exist, I have responsibilities to the community. And that's inherent in who I am as a human being.
Just those thoughts there, I'm like, the first one seems so radically anti-American anyway, anti-Western, but that's so intriguing. I mean, it's a child is born, that's it. I'm gonna spend the rest of my parent life throwing things at you, just giving you nothing. You didn't earn anything. To think of, heck, that's what Christmas is all about. It's like this cultural sacrament of you're alive, here's gifts. Welcome to the game, welcome to the table. To think of the culture also thinking that way instead of a Hunger Games scenario. I'm actually just kind of scratching my head at like, it's like we need to imagine a whole new culture here. You know, I remember this one story someone shared about life in a small Italian town. I don't know who said the story, but they were like, you wake up in the morning, everybody opens their front doors, everybody, and then you go about your day. Why do they do that? Because sometimes as people get old, something happens. How do they signal that they need help? Well, if that door doesn't open, then I know to run over and take care of you or check in on you. I remember hearing that and my heart broke, and I thought, that's not going to happen in you know, my neighborhood, my community. We have none of that sense of community, you know, that we're called to nurture and create.
So to get back to the Dobbs decision,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's two false solutions. The real solution is to change our social and economic structures to value human life. I believe that legalizing abortion in the first place is a false solution.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't actually fix the individualistic, libertarian, capitalistic, misogynistic culture, society, that mess.
Mm-hmm.
It rather upholds it. It justifies itself, right?
Yeah.
Instead of providing women with the social and economic support they are owed,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that they can actually make free choices,
Yeah.
and not be in positions of profound vulnerability and dependence. Instead, access to abortion provides an excuse for those in power to continue upholding these structures of oppression.
Mm-hmm.
But on the pro-life side, I see another false solution, which is predominantly laws and laws prohibiting abortion, as if that's sufficient. And when you say that's not sufficient, then they point to, like, the pro-life movement points to personal charity. So I've seen a lot of memes from pro-choicers in the last week talking about how, like, pro-lifers don't care about babies after they're born. They just care about them, up until birth. And there's an ugliness in that. I've been around pro-life people my whole life. I mean, I've been one of those people my whole life. The people praying at abortion clinics, the people volunteering at crisis pregnancy centers.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these are the most generous people that I know.
Mm-hmm.
They are personally generous with their resources, with their time, with their willingness to, if they know someone in their community who's in a crisis pregnancy, to do whatever they can for them.
Right.
The problem, though, is the personal charity is not sufficient, and isn't sufficient in Catholic teaching either. There's a recognition that just as there can be structures of sin within a society, structures of injustice,
Mm-hmm.
that we have to work towards solidarity, structures of justice and respect for life. So this would mean building structures that give universal access to healthcare, that make sure everyone has a living wage, that give things like maternity leave and paternity leave and child tax credits, like where what Catholic social teaching proposes is that the excess wealth of the rich needs to be redistributed to the most vulnerable, so that everyone has what they need to live. Everyone has basic things like food and shelter and access to medical care and just wages. These are basic things. These are not the extravagant things like if we get everything else. The church says these are the most basic things that are owed to people.
Right.
And we have to build structures that support that. Personal charity doesn't do that. It's good and it's important, but it's far from sufficient.
Well, that's the whole point, isn't it, of the king and a kingdom, is to be the safety net for those who have no net. And that's why we are meant to pay into it, and that's why it existed, is because it's not possible for all of us to, I don't know, make it all work all on our own. We bond ourselves into tribes, and the tribe takes care of us. You know?
Yes. So one of my places of discomfort with the Dobbs decision, even though I agree with it objectively, is that instead of changing these structures, changing our society and our economy, all it does is shift the burden of pregnancy and childcare entirely onto women.
Mhm.
It doesn't solve the underlying problem. It doesn't address the underlying problem at all. All it does is restrict abortions more, which is good, but it's so insufficient that it's hard to celebrate the good that it is. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of, and again, I haven't read the decisions like you have, but from what I'm hearing is instead of proactively defining a good, it was like, we shouldn't have made that decision, so we're going to take that one back off the table. But it's like you say, yeah, still not solving a problem. And you've got some pointers, and then we're going to move into the next talking point, which is integrity, about partisan sides and stuff like that. So we'll get into that in just a second. We do want to very gratefully thank our sponsor that's helping us to bring you this show. They are Select to Give. As they say, more Catholic leaders choose Select International Tours more than any other pilgrimage company. With 35 years of award-winning travel planning, they have a track record of excellence and faithfulness. And they're a small company with a big heart, because every one of their pilgrimages helps to support and fund their 501c3 charity work, which is all about helping Christians thrive in the Holy Land. So if you're ready to travel, or if you're looking to lead a group of your own, take the next step on your pilgrimage by visiting selectinternationaltours.com. Okay, so in wrapping up that sort of first part of a thing to think about, and then moving into integrity, any final thoughts there?
Yeah. So I said I read a lot and listen a lot to the conservative David French. This was a month or two ago. He was talking about the research that had been done to say that that if Roe is reversed, which it has been, that was a couple months ago. Anyways, if it's reversed, that it would reduce abortions by 10 to 15% nationally. Um, and then David French pointed out, he's like, Senator Mitt Romney has recently proposed his own extended child tax credit, which is similar to the extended child tax credit that President Biden did for 2021, but then expired. So taking the earned income tax credit for kids and giving it to everybody and spreading it out in monthly checks instead of all at once in your tax return, which was extremely helpful to my family of 4 kids.
Yeah, no kidding.
Romney proposed a permanent version that had tweaks to it, had some more limitations on it, whatever, but similar. And there was research done on that legislation that it would also have reduced abortions nationally 10 to 15%. In other words, the lives on the ground saved in passing Mitt Romney's legislation would have been similar to the lives on the ground saved by reversing Roe versus Wade. And yet, and this is something that David French pointed out, where was the mainstream pro-life support for Romney's proposal? Romney, who's a moderate Republican, it wasn't there because Romney was anti-Trump. And I think this is the thing, moving to integrity. We talked about integrity a lot a couple weeks ago when we talked about fighting culture wars, and how if we really want to change the culture, we have to have integrity. What I saw in 2015 and 2016, and what I saw grow in 2017 and 2018, and through the pandemic, and up till today, is the pro-life movement not just tolerating someone like Trump as a means to an end, which is reversing Roe, right? But championing him and defending him.
Yeah, uncritically.
Uncritically, absolutely. And the reality is that Donald Trump's brand is selfishness and misogyny. So, like, what do you think about his character, his personal character? And I'm not saying anything about that, saying how he presents himself, his brand
Mhm.
is misogyny. Like him on the cover of Playboy, right?
Mhm.
How can pro-lifers say that they care about women while wholeheartedly championing Trump? Right? That discontinuity is very apparent to people. And how can yeah, the way in which the movement, the way in which we attached ourselves to this like raw political power to get what we want. I think we sacrifice so much integrity to do it. And one of the things that just came out, this information just came out in the past 2 or 3 weeks. The abortion rates in the US, after Roe versus Wade, they increased for a couple decades. And then
Mhm.
for the past around 3 decades, I believe, um, they've been in a steady decline.
Wow.
And they've actually consistently declined faster under Democratic presidents and Republican presidents. Now, there's a lot of factors that play into that.
Wow.
It isn't just the president, but anyways, under the during the 4 years that Trump was president, the abortion rates, for the first time in decades, not only didn't decrease, but increased by, I believe, around 8% in this country. But this is who the movement attached itself to and devoted so much energy to, and still does. Even during the hearings that are going on about January 6th and the former president's role in that,
Mhm.
there's still this clinging to that. And people who aren't pro-life see that.
Mhm.
There was a tweet from someone showing a picture that had gone around at some point of a couple, two people, a man and a woman, at a Trump rally at some point. I don't know, and they're wearing shirts that say uh, "F your feelings," right? Trump 2020, whatever. And then in the tweet, the person said, "These people will adopt your baby." And the point was, this is how people who aren't pro-life, who aren't in the movement, see the pro-life movement. They see
Mhm.
this cognitive dissonance between people who, on one hand, are saying, we support women, we support children, while on the other hand, having gross, um, uh, this gross, like grasping at political power to get what they want.
Mhm.
And if we're truly trying to change the culture and evangelize the culture and change hearts and minds, not through power and coercion,
Mhm.
but through actually changing hearts and minds, our integrity is like the most important thing we can have.
Right.
And I believe that the movement, the pro-life movement, we have sacrificed our integrity for the sake of reversing Roe versus Wade,
Mhm.
which again I believe is objectively good, but the
Yeah.
means by which we got there
Mhm.
don't make me don't certainly don't make me feel comfortable with it.
Yeah. I think Mike Lewis put out a post on this whole the decision with Dobb and the whole seamless garment ethic. And I think that also that comes back to the point we started with beginning of this conversation with we believe in the dignity of human life from conception to natural death, or I'm not even sure where to go with that part because that's also so contentious and so on. But the inviolable dignity of human life at all stages of life, and if we're trying to practice that with integrity, then that has to inform all of our policies, and that's or what we vote on and what we talk about and how we talk about. And that's something coming into this call, and you and I were chatting about this sort of thing, and it's like we become incredibly partisan, of course, in America, maybe other countries too, because there are certain goods that we want to see happen that maybe need to happen. And then what do you do when you're Catholic and you're like, there's a good in this party and there's a good in this party, and I can't totally align with either because there's also deeply problematic ways that things are put into practice, or you know collapsing whatever, we not go there. But so as a Catholic, wanting to live out of that sense of integrity, what do we do? What are some practical tips that, yes, be pro-life, but how? In a way that's has integrity.
Yeah. I think the first thing is, as I say a lot, real vulnerable prayer and honesty with yourself and with the Lord, and self-reflection. I think that's always the foundation for any type of change. I think it's really important to give up our partisanship, no matter what our partisanship is. The U.S. bishops, in their voting document that's been out for several years, Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, that's the name of it. They have a line in there where they talk about how good and noble the political vocation is, how good and noble and essential it is for Catholics to participate in the political life of their nation.
Mm-hmm.
But how we must be on guard. The reason why it's good and noble is that Catholics precisely are called to bring the values of the gospel, the values of human dignity and justice into the political sphere.
Right.
But we must be on guard, the bishops warn, from allowing our party politics to allow us to abandon those principles in order to get along. They say we must transform the parties we belong to and not let those parties transform us.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're really called to, the conversion that we are called to as Christians, as Catholics who value life, is, do I value what the church teaches about human dignity and justice more than I value my political ideology?
Yeah.
When it comes down to it,
yeah.
What do I value more?
To that point, that's something that deeply unnerved me about activity from both sides, in the recent elections. And I'm concerned, of course, it's going to come back and happen again now that we've created a precedent or a pattern for it. But in a way, I feel like the mask also slipped, on the whole process, because the elevation of winning a presidential position or whatever was elevated into a spiritual sphere, and everybody got in for, not just for the practical and political reasons, but it became a moral discussion, and you're damned if you don't vote this way, and you're hastening the apocalypse, and
and it became their identity.
And that to me, what you just said about what the bishops are calling us to mind is that we have to bring the gospel into these discussions and not, be going the other way. And on the one sense, I have some concern. On the other, I'm open to hope and willing to be hopeful, because I think that the mask slipped. And I think as we gain a little bit of distance, we can look back and realize, did we show an ugly side of ourselves with the conspiracy theories and the number of priests who just made names for themselves, courting Vigano and pushing his tracts, and just, it was really, really something. That's where we deify politics, or we try to find God in the wrong places, I think. And that's why I want to ask you these questions. What are some practicals that we can do when maybe we feel like we don't have a voice, or our impact isn't really going to be much? Should that even be our level of concern?
I think if we consider ourselves pro-life, and if we present ourselves to others, whether in the real world or on social media, as pro-life, which I think is an important thing to do, then any change we can make to be consistent with that in a greater way is a positive change. I think one of the immediate things we can do is stop demonizing the people who disagree with us. And I know you can probably say, you just spent the past 15 minutes trashing Trump. I mean that in the sense of, oh man, I've just seen so many terrible conversations and so many terrible like hurling memes at faceless people on the other side over the past week,
Mhm.
which isn't any different than the week before, or what I've seen for the past 6 years or more.
Mhm.
We have to be able to, as we've mentioned in past episodes, get to the point where we recognize that there are people who disagree with us on serious issues who have goodwill and sound mind. That doesn't mean they're not wrong,
Mhm.
but it doesn't mean that they're pure evil or stupid. And there's a lot of really intense feelings that people have.
Mhm.
There's celebration and jubilation, and there's sadness and fear. And I think, out of respect for the dignity of the other, we have to be willing to temper our feelings to hear someone else's and make a
Mhm.
space for someone else's. And what we absolutely can't be doing, especially if you present yourself as pro-life, is be thrown around like owning the libs memes, or have this attitude of like, um, yeah, just this gross attitude of like stomping on your enemy type of thing,
Right.
versus an attitude that seeks to encounter the other as other and hear their perspective and value them as a person with infinite dignity,
Mhm.
because only then do we have any chance of changing hearts and minds.
Yeah. It's also a important opportunity. I mean, on the one hand, with like conversations online, be practical and realistic about whether it's actually going to be a productive conversation and whether you actually need to engage in it, at all. So
I thought all
there's,
conversations online were productive.
well, whatever puts you to sleep at night. And I know we make our living doing stuff online, but well, some of it. But meeting people from the other side, something my wife and I try to do a lot is listen to and watch videos from, people from the other side. And half the time, what I find is I don't even know why I believe the stuff that I believe, and it's a great opportunity to really sit in silence and come to understand, like the whole walk a mile in their shoes, and understand that by the time somebody comes down to making a decision, whatever we agree with or disagree with, we've talked about this in previous episodes, like when people choose to walk away from, from the faith, something that we hold as, very dear and so on, it, how we treat them is no different to how we should be treating anybody else that we disagree with, different party. That same sense of allowing them to be where they are. But then the question is, who are you? And what is your interaction with them also revealing about you that you need to change? Is that I love that photo of the like there's a line of matches and half of them are burning up, but one match is like bowed out of the lineup to maybe preserve the rest. And we're called to be that one that doesn't get triggered and butt dialed into talking points and and influencers clickbait defining your life. There's so ridiculous much of that, but to be the one that bows out of the lineup, you know, I'm not going to pass on whatever this is. You know, I'm not going to be like everybody else. And yes, I'm going to be painted with the same brush as they are because I identify with certain labels. But to be that point of change, really today, I see such a point of stillness, point of silence, being able to engage with other ideas, without feeling like, oh, I'm going to lose my identity if I even allow an idea into me. And who is it? It's like some Greek uh, wise person who's like, it's the mark of, what is it? The mark of wisdom or the mark of genius to be able to entertain multiple ideas, uh, without being ruined by them or being changed by them. If somebody knows that, put it in the comments, please.
Yeah. The fear of other people's ideas or other people's experiences, it betrays an insecurity about our own beliefs. Because I think the reality is that I want to believe what's true. And the truth will ultimately rise to the surface. The truth doesn't need me to protect it. Um, so I should have no fear in hearing other people's perspectives and other people's experiences.
Mhm.
Um, and just be willing to sift through what's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have to be defensive about it.
And also, I think there's the care that we have to have about trying to identify universal rules. You know, what works in one area of the country or for a certain group of people or a certain phase of life may not work or be the same anywhere else. And I think it's a mark of maturity to be able to wrestle with that or understand how, for example, I was just listening earlier today to Field Hospital with Mike Lewis and Jeannie Gaffigan. They were talking with Kupich. I forget.
Yeah,
And they're
Supich.
talking- Supich, pardon me.
He's a fun name.
Yeah. And that sense, the talking about the gun violence and so on, you know, and it's like, well, that also is part of the pro-life discussion as well. And just realizing we're not going to all agree on how to resolve an issue like that. But we also then have to begin to understand we can't create things like, I don't know, I'm assuming maybe, we can't create laws that are going to apply everywhere because there are different cultural backgrounds, different people with different histories and expectations of how one tribe meets another, you know. And if we forget that kind of thing, it's easy to want to have like one law for everybody. And it's not, life is not that obvious.
I think the key thing is that we have to agree that the deaths lost through gun violence are a problem and that our society shouldn't have that. And I think that's where, like with all of these things, the church does not propose specific policies. It says everyone has a right to health care. But is that something that like the conservative pro-life movement, is that a value that they have that they're working towards just with their own solution? Like I don't see that. And I think that's the problem is the church doesn't give us specific policies, but it does give us moral mandates. We have to be working towards a society where everyone has access to healthcare. We have to be working towards a society where women and children and pregnancy and family life are valued as a priority.
Put our focus back on these greater things, these realities. Because that, like you said earlier about, trying to solve the symptom rather than the situation that is the cause of that, and fighting for the contexts that allow women to feel safe, you know, before or after pregnancy. I mean, how many get into that situation because, again, they feel like they don't have a choice, or, you know, certain kinds of relationships they feel like they have to enter into them, or it's the only answer to maintain an existing lifestyle. And because of deep sense of a lack of security and a lack of safety, because yes, it is going to change their lives. And I think that's what frustrates me so much. Like you said, it can't be the answer. It's the wrong solution. Because it does not, it's like, it's the only healthy, I mean, it's the biologically healthy response to a certain situation that is meant to change our lives. It's meant to force our attention, bring our attention back to what is the bigger context that is routinely creating this situation where God is entering into this creative act and a new person is being, you know, brought in into creation, into the world. That's where the focus needs to be on, like you say, the care for the family, safety of the individual. So, any final thoughts on as we wrap up here?
I don't think so. I think we have alienated enough people, Dominic.
And that's what I don't want to do, you know. And you know, we do believe what we do believe, and we do want to create a space to talk about them. And I think it's important that guys also talk, you know, about these issues. It frustrates me when somebody says you're not in this stage or this kind of life. You don't get to have an opinion. It's like, well, I really disagree with that, because there are those who create contexts within which you can live, or within which somebody can go and do something. There's everybody else who has a responsibility towards that, you know. And in this case, it's the fathers and it's the men, and how we are entering into dating and business and marriage, and all of that is creating the context where I see where women feel like they're in an impossible choice.
we all have opportunity to be more consistently pro-life in our choices, whether that's our choices in how we communicate with others, our choices in our relationships, our economic choices, our business choices, and I think that's the mandate that we're called to, is to always be more consistently pro-life.
Yeah, there we go. And I would hope that everybody, as a Catholic, could agree with that. Otherwise, it's time to sit and think a little harder, or sound off in the comments. Again, no interest in alienating people, but hey, these are things that we do hold as extremely important. So thanks, Paul, for chatting about this today. Friend, listening to this podcast, or if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that like button right now, subscribe, so more people can hear about what the work we're doing with Pope Francis Generation. On my end, this show is sponsored by the free Catholic community on smartcatholics.com. It's kind of a home away from Facebook, free of trolls and ads and toxicity, faithful to the Holy Father, Pope Francis, and the Church, committed to a culture of kindness and learning. So if that sounds like you, come and check us out, create a free profile, figure out what's going on smartcatholics.com. Maybe share this episode. If it resonated with you, with the one friend that you think would like to hear this. If you have a question, Paul, where can folk reach out to either for us to respond to in the next episode, or maybe have you respond to them privately? Where can they go?
Yeah, you can find me at popefrancisgeneration.com. I have other things I do there. I've lots of writing. I'm leading some retreats later this year as well. So you can check out all of my projects there. You can support the work that I'm doing if you like it, and you can reach out to me. So that's popefrancisgeneration.com.
Fantastic. So till next time, friends, say a short prayer for yourself. Please pray for us. And remember, don't be afraid to ask questions. Doubts can be a sign that we want to know God better and more deeply. God bless.